Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Board's meeting of February the 10th. Again, this is a hybrid public meeting. Members of the public are welcome to participate in person or remotely. In person, we are at the Norton Town Hall at 72 East Main Street. You can join online using the Zoom link available in the meeting agenda or meeting ID 638-929-1060. The meeting will also be available on Norton Cable Access and the Norton Media Center's YouTube page. For future sessions, please feel free to email questions to the board ahead of the meeting to Brian Carmichael, town staff, so they can be forwarded to the members and shared ahead of the meeting. So with that out of the way, we'll dive into our agenda today. We do have a couple of items for planning board business and policies. I know Paul had emailed the group asking about a potential joint meeting on Thursday with the select board for an executive session. This would be just to get a joint update from council on the progress of the Hill Street discussion. So I think they did notice the meeting, but if we are not going to have quorum, that does not necessarily need to be there. Do we feel like, I know I've gotten a couple of notes from people saying they would or would not be able to attend. Do we feel like we're going to have quorum there? It started originally as Tim is going to go, and then it just kind of widened from there. So, yes, it has been posted, but if it's not quorum, then we wouldn't officially call the meeting.
Got it.
So, do we feel like we're going to have quorum?
I'm available to be there.
I'm available.
I will be there.
Okay, it sounds like we'll probably have quorum, so we'll plan on that. And we'll get the update on that matter. In terms of bills and warrants, if we want, Brian has one bill for, I believe, $25 or something that he'll pass around if anybody wants to take a look. Rob, yes?
One quick question. The notice I got said the meeting was 5:30 or 6. Oh my God. Do you know which one of those is this?
6.
6. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
You don't need to talk.
Apologies for the microphones, everybody. It's a new audio setup this evening, so we're all working through it together.
I think if I put this midpoint between you and I, we're good.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. We do have some minutes to approve, but unless anybody's eager to get that out of the way, I think I'll save those to the end. Any objections?
No.
Okay. So the first item in our discussion section of our agenda is a discussion of our zoning bylaw recodification. So thank you to council who's been assisting us on this process, Mr. Bobrowski. I know you had designs on kind of a workshop and you wanted to kind of go first so we weren't too tired to get through it with you. So I'll cede the floor to you to give your introduction and then we'll get going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members. Mark Bobrowski for the record. My office is in Concord, Massachusetts. I'm delighted to be here in your beautiful new town hall. This is a great improvement. I'm sure I remember the old one. So.
Yeah. I think I'll try and ask you to get the mic a little bit closer to
Sure.
you.
Thanks.
I'm getting the eyes from the camera guys.
All right, good job. So I'm going to propose to walk you through where we are tonight. I have on the screen up there draft 6, which is dated the 14th of December. I know we circulated a draft 4 in October. I took that and gave it to my office manager, Ruth Terry, who has been only through 40 of these before, and she meticulously combs it to make sure that the numbers are correct and the format is correct, and she puts up with all of my inability to do that. And that basically is what produced draft 6. So if you didn't see 5, that was an internal document between me and Ruth. I also had a couple of things that were provided to me by, first of all, our last meeting. I know Laura gave me a list of cleanup items, which I did incorporate into draft 6. So I think we're close with draft 6 to having a document that would be ready for public hearing. And I'm going to walk you through it tonight. The idea that I have as a takeaway at the end of the evening is that, and I'll be taking notes, so go slow, we need to make 2 decisions. One is this draft 6 ready to go to draft 7 if not what needs to change. I think some of it, usually at this point in the game, it's more small changes than it is big changes, because we've already had a number of drafts in which there were big changes. So having worked with you now for the better part of a year, my idea, I hope you think it's acceptable, is that Paul and Laura and I would go through the next level of format, topographical changes that need to be made in order for this to get to the finish line. The second issue, and I thank Steve for his contributions, is that there are a lot of things that are popping out of the side stage that I don't feel capable of making the decisions on. If there's a major topic being introduced that isn't in what I've provided to you already, it may or may not be beyond the scope of a recodification. That's level one decision. If it is within the scope of a recodification, do you want to do it? And if you do want to do it, how do we get to the finish line? And perhaps we could repeat the process again, this time with Steve. I think in order to do that, Steve, I would like you to just give me and the committee a list of the substantive changes that you'd like to propose, so that we can treat it as a sushi menu and they can decide whether it's time to do it, it's time to bank it, we can come back next year and do it, or what the fate of your proposal will be.
All of the documents have been submitted, I think, for the better part of maybe a month now. I mean, we can run through the list. My main topic is the uses table. Most of the actual bylaw itself is perfectly fine and acceptable. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, just the uses table is what I'd like to go through
Okay.
as a group.
So why don't we make it a plan that the use table gets distributed with today's date to all the members, Steve's use table, and that we'll plan on scheduling a meeting just to go through that document. You can lead the charge.
Okay.
I'll be taking notes more than trying to direct things. Sure. And when we're done with that meeting, we'll have a consensus use table.
That sounds fine to me. Thank you.
That's a great deal of progress there. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through this, remind you what we changed, what we didn't change. I'm going to stop at the end of every section. If you want to ask a question, just put a hold on something and we'll go from there. So remember, and if there's not a lot of changes or important changes, I'm not going to belabor the obvious. So with regard to the use, the section 1 material, this is, I think, the only thing that we've really saved here from your earlier version is 1.6 amendments. The rest of this is pretty boilerplate language. You can see the numbering system that I'm using. I'm preserving 175, but it only appears at the main 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 captions. That makes general code generally happy if you can continue to use their numbering system. I might shorten up the purpose clause here. I think I had a case decided while I was in the fall called Pobedo, RT. In the Pobedo case, I represented a private defendant who got permission to build an 85,000 square foot R&D facility in Watertown. The Pobedo people claimed they had standing because the bylaw in Watertown said one of the purposes of the bylaw was to promote preservation of property value. That's not generally a recognized grounds for standing. And I argued to the appeals court that just because it's in the purpose clause doesn't mean you get standing. There's plenty of cases from the Supreme Judicial Court that say you don't have standing if your only claim for injury is the preservation of property value. And the court agreed with me. They called this kind of language in the purpose clause fluff, just to sort of give a general overview of purpose, not to create standing for individuals. So I'd be tempted, if anything, here to take 1.2 out and cut it back to the bare bone, because a lot of people read this and think it actually creates rights when in fact it doesn't at all. And the Pobedo case really confirms that.
Yeah.
So I'll just,
Obviously, at town meeting, taking it away as we took this out when doesn't necessarily carry that weight.
Yeah. Well, now that case has been actually cited by the appeals court in another case since. So I'm going to put it down as a discussion item. What you might see next time is a more cut and dry 1.2. That'd be my druthers. All right, so that pretty much outlines the major changes, and I know you've got an MBTA discussion coming up at 8:15. That pretty much outlines the major changes in section 1.
Mr. Bobrowski, can
Sure.
we just take a quick look at 1.63?
Yep, looking at it.
The last 4 words, unless the adoption of such amendment is recommended by the planning board in its report thereon. Can we just end that sentence at planning board? Because if there's not an actual report, I don't know what report we're referring to, and if there's not a report, I don't want to get caught out on a technicality.
So can I
I
can
think
answer that.
generally Paul puts together a report for anything we recommend for town meeting.
Okay, but even if something is rejected that we want to bring back, is there a report subsequent to that?
Our report would be we want to put this on town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so any action that you take, whether it's recommend for or recommend against it, there's a report to select board.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this all stems from Chapter 48, Section 5. I know that under 48.5, the planning board, you used to be required to make a recommendation for town meeting to consider it, but they changed that because planning boards weren't doing that. Now the rule is that unless you make a recommendation, and it can be in the form of a report, the town meeting can't vote on it unless 21 days have transpired. So if you get to town meeting 14 days after your public hearing and there's no recommendation, the moderator rules it out of order. But that seldom happens. All right, I'm going to treat this like the budget at town meeting. Can I move on to section 2? Great.
Could you be able to enlarge it just a little bit so it appears bigger on our screens?
I can, sure.
I'm sorry, I'm old.
Tell me about it.
There with you.
You're not as old as me. It's my birthday tomorrow.
Let's go with that.
How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so down to section 2, districts. I don't think we eliminated any districts here. Trying to remember, but that's not, I know in one of the towns we eliminated 2. I think it was Wakefield.
Do we still have that issue about is it wetlands or water resource protection district? Which one was the sticky wicket?
Wetland.
It's the wetland.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
Do we have a resolution on that or is it still in the wind?
Well, I've had conversations with conservation agent who was fine with us removing it, since this doesn't. If there are wetlands, Concom has jurisdiction over it. It's very possible this will be picking up areas without wetlands that we would be applying wetland protections on.
I think
And another discussion was we have a district without a map. That was basically
there is a map. It's all narrative. It goes on for 3 pages. Then it's, westerly. But I don't, first of all, that's probably written a long time ago, and those lines probably changed. And then even more importantly, I wouldn't get rid of anything until and unless there was a Concom bylaw being sponsored at town meeting so that you had a local wetlands bylaw adopted as a general bylaw. That's 50% plus 1 vote that could take its place. That's clearly the intent of the town, is to regulate more stringently than the 310 CMR, 10 point, what is it, 1.5? I can't remember the number. So
from your opinion, this would fall into the leave it alone for now.
is Concom ready with a substitute general bylaw?
No.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Been under
Okay.
consideration.
Sort of outside the scope of a recodification. Mass Association of Conservation Commissions has plenty of model stuff that can easily be reviewed.
I know we'd had back and forth on it a number of times about is this enforceable, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah, that's a whole
that's a different question.
That's a whole
Understood.
kettle of fish. Yeah. So I would leave it in until the time when Conservation Commission is avidly supporting a substitute general bylaw. And there's so many towns that have done a great job in this that you can literally pick your choice off a shelf and see what other towns have had to say. My town calls the Conservation Commission the Natural Resources Commission, and they do a great job. Other than that, I think we've stuck with the districts that you had, floodplain, groundwater or water resources protection, the marijuana overlay district. And I don't think, are we making any substantive changes to the 1974 map as amended?
We're not changing any of the zoning districts or boundaries as part of this, I don't think.
Okay. Right. So when I prepare the warrant article, somebody remind me that we should not delete the map. Because I'm going to prepare the warrant article by saying, in the old bylaw, delete section 1, introduction, section 2, district, section 3, definitions. It's just going to march on through the major captions. And then it'll say substitute, therefore, the major chapter headings in the new bylaw. And if I include the map section, I'm going to have to dance my way around it. So I'll just make a note to keep the old map.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to make any map changes.
Correct.
Is that
Not
correct?
as
There's
part of
nothing-
this process.
Good, okay.
The
All right,
next item,
anything
yes.
else on section 2? So section 3 is the use regulations. And we're going to go through Steve's use table at a forthcoming meeting, so I don't plan to pull up the use table this evening, knowing that you've got a short schedule for me. But the major things that we've added here, I've just taken the liberty of adding 25 parking spaces to the special permit for certain uses, 3.2.1. I believe that they actually appeared in 2 different places, but when I checked the language, it seemed like they could easily be merged by having the 25 or more parking spaces added to the 10,000 square feet increase, either or one of which would trigger the need for a special permit in the use table. So when you read the use table, you might see a yes, but if you check it back to 3.2.1 and it has 25 parking spaces or 10,000 additional square feet, it needs a special permit. And that's the way you seem to be doing business today.
Yeah, the or is definitely the
Yeah.
status quo.
Under the accessory use provision, there are some that are listed in the use table, but the land court has really finessed this issue in the last 5 years or so. The rule of thumb for the main part of the use table, the principal uses, is that if it's not listed, you can't do it. That's standard 101 zoning practice. So I had a case actually in Charlton for the planning board where a gentleman proposed 1 million square feet of marijuana space. 860 was grow, 140 was manufacturing and processing, but the bylaw didn't say that accessory uses in the agricultural district included manufacturing and processing at a marijuana grow facility. So we argued, you can't do it. Doesn't say you can do it. And the land court said, well, how is the town supposed to anticipate every accessory use if it's consistent with the overall definition for an accessory use, that is typically, customarily, and subordinate, then you can do that too. If it's normally associated with the principal use and it follows that general rule and it's on the same property, then you can do pretty much anything as an accessory use. So I've tried to, keep consistent with land use practice, at least here, which is to allow it. There are some in the use table that are specifically listed, but anything else not listed would still be eligible because it would fit into the process. And then home occupations is a separate section of the use regulations. I don't think, we toyed, I think, with adopting do you have customers, clients, pupils, or non-resident employees coming to the premises? When I revisited the current system that you have, that's pretty much what it says. So I didn't see the need at the end of the day to change it. And I kept what you have intact. And then the solid waste facility is currently a provision in the bylaw. I know that in one town I worked in recently, which is Irving, they too had this. I didn't see the need to repeat it, and I got my hand slapped by the AG's office. They said, it's in the old bylaw, put it in the new bylaw, because there's a specific date in this provision, which is 1987. That's a trigger. So you can't go back before or change anything after 1987. You're sort of stuck in time with what you allowed in 1987, and that's in the general laws. And that's the use section. Everything else falls into the category of the individual use table entries, and that's forthcoming attraction. I did tweak the use table, and the current version is in Paul's hands. It didn't change in terms of dimensions. I think the only thing I really changed is some of the footnotes, which no longer applied. When the old numbering system went by the boards, there was no need to repeat it in the footnotes, and so I think I took 8 footnotes and reduced it to maybe 2 or 3. That's it. That's the only change to the dimensional regulations. The rest of it is pretty much what you have today, which includes the wetlands and waterways provisions here, although there's a later one coming. This is just in terms of calculating lot area. Lot shape factor.
I know you recommended we get rid of it, and we told you we're leaving it alone.
Yeah, I took that advice seriously. So there it is.
You said we could do something simpler, and we said, well, we don't have to do the calculations, so we don't care how simple it is.
No, there's a lot of math there, and I'm not a math guy. So. Multiple dwellings, these are...
Mark?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
before we get too far forward, could I make a recommendation for one thing on 4.1?
4-1?
Yeah, 4.1.1.
Yeah.
Right now, we only allow in the residential zone, one principal permitted building.
Yeah.
Could we, if the board agrees, change that to one principal permitted residential building?
I don't like that.
So no other buildings are allowed on a residential property, even if they're allowed on the.
That's not what this is saying. I agree with Tim. It wasn't needed. It's a principal dwelling, and the principal use is residential. So you can't have 2 houses on a single property, but you could have a house and an
attached
accessory
garage.
building,
Yeah.
a barn, a garage, a shop.
Okay, but you can't have two like if you have a house and you ran a daycare, can you put the daycare in a separate building?
Yes. You just cannot have 2 principal use dwellings. The principal use in residential is housing.
But a daycare wouldn't be a housing.
No.
No, agreed.
It's a Dover.
It's an accessory use.
But it is allowed as a separate building?
It's a protected Dover use. So any Dover use enjoys the ability to look at section 4.1 for every principal permitted, even if it said you can only have one building on a lot, you could, as a child care facility, claim Dover protection and ask to be a second building on that lot and have what I would call a deviation authorized under the Dover Amendment. Now, that's a stretch of the Dover Amendment power, but you can ask.
Even setting aside Dover. Sorry, go ahead.
I think in a lot of things we've had like just one principal building per lot. If you want to have different things, you got to have different lots. That's kind of like a core of what we've looked at with a lot of different projects.
See, I'm viewing this as principal dwelling in accessory building. So you could have a separate build. You just can't have 2 houses on a residential lot.
I brought up childcare because, for example, my first childcare visit to the appeals court, first case ever, was Petrucci versus Board of Appeals of Westwood. Joe had a barn. It was a historic barn, over 100 years old. And he had a daughter with an early childhood education, and she didn't have a job, and he was a carpenter. So he put all that together. He lived on the premises in a house, beautiful old house, and he renovated the barn, separate building, way in the back, and he put his daughter to work. It's still there today. It's called the Barnyard Daycare, and it has 50 kids every morning. The neighbors sued us, but we won. So
Yeah, I think Yeah. So I would generally leave it alone.
I think this is the real question that when I look at this is, do you want to go teeny house? When I read this, I'm thinking, do you want to have the ability to have a second dwelling in which, I can move when I'm no longer capable of managing the bigger house?
I mean, my feelings on that would be a yes, but that's not quite where I was going with
Yeah,
it. But that is a second dwelling, so I don't know if that counts as a second residential building.
It definitely
so
would.
like that wouldn't. That's not what I recommended here.
Yeah. And we're already having to account for the new state rules on accessory
Right.
dwelling units anyway. So, let's see. I think we do have primarily the audience who wanted to speak, but I think she'd need to get to a microphone. So if you don't mind just
come
stepping
right up.
back for a second, she had a hand up for a minute or two, so I want to make sure she.
Hi, Debbie Winston, Elm Street. You just touched upon my question. I had read that they wanted to have, I don't know if it's called AUD or whatever it's called, ADU. Would that stop residents who own their home putting it ADU? Whatever he said.
The new state rules, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are generally more permissive on residents as building accessory dwelling units, especially if they're detached. I think that's one of the big takeaways for Norton is that the state rules mean that you will essentially have to allow detached accessory dwelling units. So something on the property that a relative or somebody could live in.
Yeah.
No,
No.
because it's not a principal dwelling. It's an accessory dwelling. There's size limitations in the new state law, and it's viewed as something that's in addition to the principal.
And Rob, you had a question?
Well, I think this might be my question. There was a thing I read recently. They were using the term granny pods. This thing that's
Say it
used
again?
now. They were using the term. They were using the term granny pods in the article I read, and this was about before. I guess if you wanted to build a little apartment off for your mother, for your parent, for a family member, they had lifted the requirement that now you can do that. It does not have to be for a family member. Is that
That's
correct?
exactly right.
You can just build that second thing around.
And it can't be on a special permit. So I gave Paul, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months ago, the excerpts from the state law that apply to ADUs. And I circled the main substantive ones, like no special permit, like not bigger than, I can't remember, 900 square feet or 50% of the size of the principal dwelling. And there may be 6 or 7 things that I circled. And then I took your existing accessory apartment bylaw and I had numbered the ones in the state law. And then I put footnotes in your bylaw, like this doesn't comply or this is fine. And have you reached a consensus on what you want to do on ADUs? Are you working on this exclusively with me? Is there a separate committee delegated to do this? I'm the guy.
There is
Okay,
not a
that's fine.
separate committee looking at ADUs at this time.
Fine, that's fine.
That would cost money, wouldn't it?
That would. But yeah, we were fortunate. We're one of the towns that did allow ADUs by right, but they were attached. There were a few things that we had to change that the state said we had to do, and you flagged them. I know we flagged them as well. So that shouldn't be, we have to identify it in the warrant that that's changing, but that's a state mandate. And it actually is supposed to go into effect the end of this month. So we're going to have
Supposed to be the beginning of the month unless they've extended it. I
was
think-
it early February?
Yeah, they
Okay.
probably
We
did
weren't going
extend
to
it.
get
Nobody
there,
was ready.
But that's okay. We haven't had an ADU. If something comes in between now and May 19th, we'll have to figure out how to address that.
So one of the early things I'll do after the meeting tonight is I'll go back, look at that cheat sheet that I gave Paul, and I'll pass it along to you, and I'll have a recommended bylaw. We can take a crack at that as a subsequent meeting topic. I don't think you were that far off to begin with.
No, it was really detached was the big change, I think, for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the biggest one. And
Yeah.
also, the state says now you can't mandate that that the property owner has to live in either. Ours did.
Right.
But the state said no to that now.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm working in a couple of towns right now where it's got to be your grandmother, nobody else, and it's all special permit. And you have to tear it out when she leaves or unless another family member moves in, so those are the nightmare scenarios. All right, so I've made a note to that effect. Oops, that wasn't good. All right, so the rest of section 4, there's that lot shape factor again. It's all pretty much what you have. Section 5, well, we touched on this early in the game. This is my standard nonconformity section. I think it's very friendly to the average homeowner because there are certain situations in which alteration of a non-conforming single or two-family will be allowed as of right. They were situations in which before you might have needed a special permit. You would have gotten the special permit had you applied for it. What's the point of belaboring the obvious? If it's that obvious, give them a building permit and not a special permit. But it does preserve the right for people who don't fit within the guidelines to still make an application for a special permit and have the Zoning Board of Appeals make a decision.
Yeah. And just for everybody watching either here in person or watching remotely, we had the Zoning Board of Appeals as part of this process with you, and they were on board with this as well, especially with the volume of existing nonconformings that we have in Norton, which might not outnumber the amount of actual conforming lots, but it's probably closer than we'd like to admit, Paul, right?
Yeah, I lived up the road in Mansfield for many years, and I remember when I moved into town, the lot had to be 30,000. Within 2 years, it was 45,000. Within 4 years, it was 60,000. This is all in my neighborhood. My lot barely qualified as a 30,000 square foot lot, but imagine the number of non-conforming lots created in Mansfield, roughly from the period 1988 to 1992. I think we counted over 12,000. So all of those lots that were created earlier in the game were still legal if you acted properly on your rights, but they didn't conform with zoning and never will. So this is a really important section. It really hits a lot of people. And there's also a section in here now on tear downs. So if you do have a house and it's on a non-conforming lot and you want to tear it down and build something better, well, the new rule would be basically you can go ahead and do that as of right if you put the same foundation in the same place and you don't increase the general, the gross floor area of the house. If you're going to make it bigger or you're going to move the foundation, you got to get a special permit. That way all the neighbors get a voice in what happens next. Also, a little tweak here under abandonment or non-use. If your non-conforming structure, any non-conforming structure, becomes is abandoned or not used for a period of 2 years, it loses its protected status. Given the slow pace of insurance coverage and the otherwise complicated permitting process, if that happens, you can make an application to the ZBA for a special permit, and they can reinstate the protections of nonconformity. I think it's a useful tool. Okay, off-street parking and loading. Now we're into some general requirements that I generally didn't change.
Mark, I'm sorry, what is 6.12 reserved for?
My next edit sweep to get rid of that.
Okay.
I'll find something to put there, don't worry.
All right.
Yeah, we just took out, I think what was there before was a loosening of the table requirements for the number of spaces, and I merged that into a later provision. I didn't need to say it twice, so I'll pick something to move into there that works as a separate freestanding thing.
Okay.
It won't be a major change. You tend to divide this stuff up with regard to residential versus non-residential parking requirements. In the residential section, you had a couple of dinosaurs like housing for persons who are age qualified and income qualified. That tends to, I don't think I've seen any of that done other than under Chapter 40B in 30 years. So just, call a spade a spade. There's no need to list that. It's just taking up space.
mark in that table where it says same next to multi-dwelling residential uses?
Yeah,
What is meant by same?
it's meant to be multi-dwelling residential uses.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it means all single-family dwellings, right? Like it says right above it.
Yeah.
yeah. I could be clearer there. I'll fix that.
You could just paste it in there.
I'm just, what's the point of the column if it's just saying?
Yeah, it's your old column. I probably don't need it. I'll delete the
Just
column.
delete it.
Okay, that's fine. In isolation, I went, wait a second.
Plus, we have definitions anyway, so.
Yeah.
All right, so then you've got non-residential parking requirements. I had given you Easton's to look at. These are kind of mishmash. It's not, you got a lot of things that are lumped together. Are they all to be exactly treated the same way? Just look at residential care, public assembly, camps, homes for the aged, hospitals, nursing, commercial recreational facilities. There's a lot of things to say one space for each 2 beds or 2 persons or of rated design capacity. Easton's tends to be a lot more precise. It breaks it down into categories and subcategories that are in many cases different. Think of the difference between a doctor's office and a business office. When was the last time you went to the doctor and there weren't 10 people ahead of you in line? Now, when you go into a business office, you've got an appointment, you're in, you're out. So those 10 people that are ahead of you in the doctor's office have cars in the parking lot. Generally speaking, business offices are parked at 1 space per 200 square feet. I'm sorry, that's a medical office. And a business office would be 1 space per 250 or 300 square feet. So you want to be able to break that down into a more precise calculation. And the good news is that if you don't like that and you think you can do better, there's a provision at the end of this section that says, just ask us for a special permit. We're not any more interested in building an ocean of asphalt where it's not needed than you are. So if you can convince us that you don't need all that parking, you won't need a variance anymore, which is a vast improvement because a variance is very difficult to get.
Mark, I did send out a document that had a reduced parking requirement table. We don't have to go through it right now, I guess, but another time could we look at that more specifically?
Let's put it on the agenda with your use table.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
I guess, Mark, one question on this is, does this fall within a recodification?
Yeah, I'm not a stickler.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Okay.
I'd rather have a good product than an unchanged product if what I left intact was bad. So I'll tell you when I'm getting nervous. The ultimate barometer is not me, it's the voters at town meeting. If they see that you've changed a lot of things under the guise of a recodification, there's a certain nervous moment there. And sometimes it's better to take the more complicated things, pull them out of the bylaw the first time through, come back in a year when you've got a new base document, see if you can make an improvement. That's a strategy that will work. But you're going to know that better than me. So I would just revisit this. Like look at the top of the page, offices. You've got business offices listed with medical offices, and it's the same parking requirement. So I'm going to resend Easton's.
Yeah. I thought we had said we wanted to move forward with one of the, I thought it was Easton. I forget.
It
There
was
were, you
Easton, I would
sent
say.
2.
We were going to try and blend them with ours.
Okay.
That was the intent.
I'm trying to remember who else's I would have sent you. It might have been Foxborough's because.
Andover, I think.
Okay, yeah, it was Andover. Easton's is pretty good, and it's a local community, so you can have, you can call the planner and ask him what's up. So is Foxborough for that matter, but they tend to complicate things with that stadium. How do we want to approach this? Do we want to have a parking table subcommittee?
I think
I sent a document already. Just everybody can look at it.
Okay. What did you do?
I just reduced the numbers. I kind of looked up some statistics, what averages are, and went with a minimum that I thought was reasonable.
Okay. Let's put Easton's back on the table too, and we'll try to put that job to bed. Okay.
Okay.
This tends to be, in my opinion, there's the saving grace of having the final provision here, which says,
Yeah, we've done that a few times with different applicants. Notably, I think the National Weather Service, who has a bunch of equipment that takes up space but doesn't have a car.
well, you can see the last 6.1.13, and this is also in signs. It's also in the general performance standards section. So if the planning board, in the course of a special permit or site plan approval, decides that they can vary the requirements of parking section, it will be upon a finding that there will be no substantial detriment caused by the change.
Yeah.
And like I said, otherwise you need to apply for a variance, which can only be granted under state law if there's soil conditions, shape, or topographical features afflicting the lot not common to the district generally. A much better way to do this is the thumbs up, thumbs down vote on good or bad.
Yeah. Generally, we've had them say, show you can fit the parking on the lot that you need
Yep.
per the bylaw. If you don't need it all, you don't need to build it all right now. But if the use changes over and the next use does need it, then you need to be able to,
Yeah.
they need to be able to make it usable.
And for a major use, I did Legacy Place with the Dedham Planning Board. I'd never worked with a professional parking consulting firm before, but they had Walker come in, and they were amazing. I mean, they had it down to a very fine science. So when you go to Legacy Place, don't go on December 10th because it's not a good day. But all the rest of the year, it works just fine. All right, so signs, I don't think I changed anything, with the exception of a minor tweak to the political signs section.
That you said was illegal? Yeah.
It is. There's a case called Ledoux versus Galeo from the U.S. Supreme Court. And in that case, the U.S. Supreme Court said that the homeowner's political speech was the highest and most protected form. The sign, she had a sign that said no to the Gulf War, the first war, George Bush Sr.'s war. The kids kept tearing it down. The police made her take it down. She finally put it in her bedroom window, and a neighbor sued, and she prevailed. I'm sure the ACLU stepped in here at some point. She prevailed, and they said that sign gets to stay up every day. You can't tell people to put it up 30 days before the election and take it down 10 days after. It's the highest form of political speech. So that's what I removed from this. The lighting, and there's that special permit section again, 6.2.21, lighting. These are your old rules. And then there's that special permit section again. Landscaping, these are your old rules. And then there's that special permit section again coming up. So if any of these topics need to be varied, you can get a special permit for the modifications. This brings us to section 6.5. These are performance standards that I haven't revisited with you in many moons now, but I think you just need to give me a level of comfort that you want to keep this in, or you want, or if you don't, to tell me to take it out. I was in Wakefield about a month ago, and the Board of Selectmen looked at this section and said, I didn't get much of an argument at that point.
Laptops just came unplugged, so don't worry about it. We'll just hold here for a second if anybody's wondering why I'm sitting here and not saying anything. We good? Do we need another plug or? All good?
You good?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right, so I'll leave that to an internal discussion. I think it's ready to go if you want to leave it in. I think it's a borderline section in terms of what I said earlier and in terms of voter comfort level. It may be something that you want to bank. It's not hard for me to just pull it out and hand it to you in a separate document. Okay. I'm on section 7, special regulations. I didn't change anything in the earth materials section. I didn't change anything in the well, I did change the adult entertainment establishment section by adding to it some language which makes it constitutional.
Yes, we went over that. I think the original bylaw said it might have been available on a portion of one lot, and now it's maybe potentially available in 5 lots, which should meet the you won't get sued over prohibiting speech aspect.
Right. Two changes. One is that you can't regulate the speech directly, but you can regulate the secondary effects of the speech, which tend to be associated with crimes to people and crimes to property. The second is that there has to be a reasonable opportunity in every city or town for this kind of speech, and you had 1,000-foot linear separation requirement. We've lowered that to 500, and Chairman has now summarized that you've opened the opportunity up to half a dozen more locations. That's good enough under our case law. 7.3 wireless. I haven't changed anything in wireless. This is an interesting one, 7.4. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for another case to come down the pike. Another land court case came down the pike. It didn't add a whole lot to the knowledge bank. It's like one step up from the knowledge that Tracer Lane gave us, but it still doesn't tell us whether you can restrict areas of town completely from any solar facilities.
I would treat this topic as a third rail.
I'm well prepared to do that. So I have not changed your bylaw. And I warn you as a friendly consultant that someday we're going to have an answer to this, and right now you're just hoping yours is the right one.
Can I ask a quick question on that without going deep into it?
Yeah.
Can it be restricted from the residential zones as long as it's permitted in another type of zone in town?
If you're asking me for my educated guess, I think the answer is no.
Okay.
Right. Because at least one judge, an important judge, Judge Piper of the Land Court, has ruled that he's chief judge of the Land Court, that it's to be treated like a school, a church, or a child care facility. And you can't say no to a church in a residential district in Dover, even in 1948, which is how we got the Dover Amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just scrolling through this. The affordable housing provision.
This was another one that you had flagged as not current with existing case law.
Yes, Judge Rubin had a case last year in the Land Court in which she applied a rule that emanated from a Westwood case 10 years ago. You can't put a subdivision on a special permit. The subdivision is an animal created under the subdivision control law. It's a different kind of law. It's not discretionary. So if I comply with every rule and regulation in the subdivision packet, you have to say yes. What many towns had done, Westwood's model had nothing to do with affordable housing. It had to do with alternative development styles. We don't like that subdivision. We want you to build a fancy cluster subdivision. Apply for 2 special permits. We'll give you the one we like. That was nixed by the appeals court. Then Judge Rubin got the same case, the same principle, in a case involving an affordable housing special permit. So yeah, you can have a subdivision, now apply for the special permit so we can impose the affordable housing requirement. You can't do that. So it made headlines in Lawyers Weekly last year. And you can still apply the affordable housing bylaw to multifamily. You can't apply it to something like a 6-lot subdivision or an 8-lot subdivision because it's contrary to the rules that I just mentioned. So that's what I fixed, basically. Okay, residential cluster developments is what you had.
You told us to take it out. We said no. Yeah.
Yes, I proposed flexible development, but it's close enough. I can live with it. Accessory dwelling units, this is where the new section will go. And in section 9, there's a provision on floodplains. I didn't need to change any of that. And I might have gotten a new one, and I put in the new one. Did you have a new floodplain come from FEMA?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
When you do get the new FEMA upgrade, this is where it will go, deleting this old one and adding the new one.
This was changed or wasn't changed?
Was not.
Was not.
No. They haven't updated.
It will
the
be
flood-
changed when FEMA gives us a new one.
Right, exactly.
But I don't need to reread it now.
The Water Resource Protection Overlay District was not changed either. This is a standard model that DEP circulated at least 2 or 3 times chronologically. 9.3, this is the old Wetland Protection Overlay District that has page after page after page of the property that it applies to. This is what you see on the screen right now.
Yep.
And we're going to leave well enough alone there. The marijuana overlay district was, I think, provided to me, and I added what you gave me. And lastly, there were some sections in the village commercial district were very deep in design criteria, and I think even more so in the village center core district. So rather than litter the other sections of the bylaw with this, I moved it over into special district requirements. It's just verbatim what you have today. And then we get to the business end of the bylaw, which is building inspector's job description, the ZBA's job description, enforcement and penalties. Planning board gets its own section. Special permit language has been slightly modified. These would be the new criteria for the SPGA to use in making its decision.
Can you hold on that just for a second?
Sure.
Just to make sure that we all
What is the difference?
focus on that. So these would be criteria
Yeah.
for ours to do in a balancing test with applications for special permits.
And I think the old one had most of this in spirit, but it was redundant for the most part. It repeated a lot of things. I think this is, as I always say, these were the criteria that were the ones used in the approval of Legacy Place. Work fine.
Yeah.
18 meetings of the planning board, and a lot of professional experts involved on both sides, board and the applicant.
Yeah. And I think number 6 there has teeth that I don't think we've really had much of before.
And I would not use that as a decision maker. I would use it as an information gatherer. I did a project with Judy Barrett many years ago in the small town of Leicester. They zoned for big box, and they got it. They got it was a Walmart, I think. And they offered, they said right away, we're going to give you X dollars in general tax revenue for the building, and it sounded great. But then Judy compared the same size building in the next town over, and that 220,000 square foot Walmart generated 800 police calls a year. That's not what you promised us. So we just used it to negotiate a little bit more mitigation in the course of granting the special permit, because otherwise it was a good application.
Okay.
And then I take you to definitions at that point. We did make a few changes to site plan approval, mostly in terms of procedure. The way that the appeal provisions work now in the new draft will be that the appeal, section 10.6.16, goes directly to court. And that is, I think, the best legal and professional way to handle it. The Land Court has said a couple of years ago, Judge Foster ruled that if it's going to go directly to court, no problem, but you should have a public hearing locally so that there's a record for the judge to review. And I've taken that to heart, and I've added a public hearing requirement for site plan approval. That's pretty much it. I've also added a couple of new sections here. One is site plan approval for Dover-related uses. That's churches, schools, childcare facilities. Otherwise, it's all thrown into the lap of the building inspector, and he or she has to say yes or no. That doesn't seem fair to anybody, including the building inspector. So why not send it to the planning board first, and you make the call? Now it's a majority vote as to whether it can go forward or not. And if it's not going to go forward, it goes to court. The building inspector's, head isn't on the chopping block every time one of these things comes through. And then the last one is a reasonable accommodation for uses protected by federal disability laws. And this has mostly to do with things like drug and alcohol rehabilitation facilities. Anyone recovering from those addictions is a handicapped person or a disabled person under the Federal Fair Housing Act amendments or the ADA respectively. So, this is nuclear. You don't want to mess this up. So this is a procedure to keep you out of trouble.
Okay. And I know you have all the definitions all in the back rather than littered through every single section of the bylaw in a game of hide and seek.
Yeah, I think it goes from page 119 to page,
It's 144 pages, so probably that part.
25 pages of definitions.
Okay. So we've talked about additional hearing, just talking on the use table and the parking table, and then some additional cleanups along the way. Is there anything else that you're looking for us this evening?
No, I think the order of takeaways tonight would be the subcommittee of Laura, Paul, and me doing a basic cleanup, and then getting a meeting scheduled with Steve. We'll present those in advance of a meeting, but if we can get Steve to give us his suggestions for the use table.
Yeah, I think he has, but it's if it's gotten lost in the shuffle, lost in an email, we can make sure that that's sent to you again.
Well, most crucial is that it's sent to you, because I think we should be coming to that meeting.
And I think we have it as well.
Right.
Yes. I think Paul had sent it to us as in Steve wants to talk about this. Please don't look at it for the first time during the meeting.
Exactly.
That is the goal.
And if I think there was another thing, Steve, the parking table.
Yes.
Okay. And I think at that point in time, we're ready. I want to go to the public hearing with as clean a document as possible, because otherwise we're making floor amendments, and I don't like floor amendments.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
Yes, and for your perspective, we did submit placeholder language for the warrant already. So
I thank you for spending some time with me this evening, and we'll be moving forward at an accelerated pace, I'm sure.
yeah, I think any additional questions, comments? I know, and Mr. Siegel, if you want to just come up to a microphone so that your voice can be heard beyond this room.
Warren Siegel, 28 Cotting Road. My first question is, if this is presented to town meeting, what is actually presented to them, and how clear are the changes being outlined? Sure.
So I've got a coded version of the first probably 4 drafts, in which everything is either yellow, new, black, existing text, or strikeout for deletions. I think it's close enough, because there weren't major changes made after that, to give you an idea of what changed with regard to about 90 to 95%.
It would be a red line version?
You can't do a track change on a zoning. Once I delete something and move it over here, first of all, it doubles and triples the page numbers. But you're going to start by, if you don't read the whole thing, you'll say, well, he deleted this? No, I just moved it. You know how track change works.
What's the bigger thing? What about the table change? Those be highlighted?
I have a simple major minor change matrix that I've already given to Paul. We can fatten it up a little bit so that we see if we get everything. But
Yeah, Mr. Siegel is a former member of the planning board, and I would say probably more detail oriented than myself. So,
Thank you. Two questions. One, this version 6, I went online, and all I found was a table of contents. The whole version 6 is not online?
We'll get it there.
Okay. And then I found these new tables. Now, this is something new, or is that something generated by the board?
That's mine. I haven't proposed it.
Okay.
We'll get the clean versions out there. We've had a lot of drafts going back and forth, but I just wanted to put everything that I had out there. So
Okay.
we'll make sure that we get.
I don't know where the board's going to end up on some of these changes to the use table, but from my reading of it, it's like you're declaring war on the residents. You're taking away a lot of protections that I found in the bylaws, and I would just caution this board, if they're going to be taking up the MBTA process again this year and need it to get passed, you may want to consider postponing it. If you're going to be showing a lot of changes, use changes to residential areas, you may not want to have that come up, because there are going to be discussions on it, and it only will take away from the importance of getting MBTA passed. So if there's any real significant changes, and from what I've read, there's a lot of them. And I think just the nature of it, the number, whether or not they're required by state, or there's a good reason for them, you don't want to spend time trying to do that and get the people upset about it. Thank you.
thank you. And I did get your. I think you may have sent it to Paul too. I didn't notice, but you sent it to me earlier, and I skimmed through it, but I did not have the time in between a couple hours to go through it line by line.
I wasn't sure that it was a new document. I thought that was something that had been proposed and was ready to vote on. That's why I said.
I'd like to clarify also, this is a project that's a concept I've been working on and proposing for more than a year, maybe a year and a half, prior to this individual project. And I'm still trying to get feedback from the board about what aspects of it are palatable or not. And that's why I'm looking for an actual concentrated review to see what anybody does agree on, what might be too far, what is not. It's not a hard line. This is absolutely what it needs to be. This is just my recommendations. Some of it might not be right. I think most of it is very toned down. I think war on residential zone is a bit of a stretch, but that's fine. But I think it's something that needs an honest review. It's not an absolute for me.
So Rob, yes, just into the mic. Sorry.
Oren was asking about a document that was marked up to show the changes, and you were mentioning some of the technical limits of the track changes in Word.
right, but I do hand code it through draft 4.
Okay, there is a way you could produce one, get one marked up though, for him,
And
the way he wants it.
if the gentleman will do a test email to me, I'll send one back to you. Give me a.
I thought it was a good ask.
Yeah, no, that's why I do it, so that when someone asks for the changes, there's a document that I can easily provide to them.
Yeah, and I know that as you've said, the plan is for that you would be part of the discussion at town meeting, correct?
Well, I'm planning to come to the public hearing, assuming that it's on a day where I'm able to come. And then I'm double booked on your night of town meeting, but I'm coming to yours. Paul and I are working on it. Unbelievably, I'm doing 2 towns in May. You're both holding the town meeting on May 19th.
But we're going to try to put him on.
And
first.
unbelievably, you're both on Route 140 on the other, but the other one is just at the base of Mount Wachusett.
Not close. Okay. Yes. No, that makes sense. And thank you.
Meeting 140 itself is not your best route there,
No, definitely not.
even if it's
Okay.
the same road.
So I think that any additional questions, comments for Mr. Bobrowski at this time? Otherwise, move on to the next discussion. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And I saw a number of people come into the room about an hour into the meeting. So it looks like our message about we're going to start the MBTA discussion around 8:15 was well received. So thank you everybody for joining us. Paul, do you just want to give an introduction on kind of what's transpired since our last meeting? I know you had sent around some guidance from the state. And then the goal, I think, for people here this evening is to try to vote on specific parcels to select for notification. And again, to clarify, these would not necessarily be the final parcels that appear at town meeting. This is what we would be doing is to select the big list from which we could shrink, but from which we will not expand further before town meeting.
Correct. So with that action tonight, it would allow us, so I'll get into this because it picks up on a lot of that. I don't have too much here, but ultimately we just want to get to where the board is comfortable. And plus I want to recognize we have our select board members, and I saw that Brandon from FinCom was on here too. So to get you all to determine, give us direction as to what we can advertise, because tomorrow when the warrant closes, I'll be working with the town manager's office to solidify that schedule. Because pretty soon we're going to have to be putting the notices in the paper and getting signs and all of that. So just quickly, just following up on the discussion we had at our last meeting regarding the case with the Attorney General versus the town of Milton. I did reach out after our meeting to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and ask them specifically about the regulations and whether or not they're truly regulations or guidelines. And you have that, and it's it's also in the public Dropbox, that they feel that it is in fact regulations, that they're in effect and enforceable. I also followed up on the Wheaton College discussion. Could we use Wheaton? And again, there was another email that said it's excluded property, including ball fields was excluded. But the one thing I really wanted to point out there, I think it was Zach last meeting who asked the question, well, how closely are they going to look at this? And when I looked at the response, and they said, well, we looked at the attribute tables, the land map attribute tables for Wheaton College to make this determination. Thought, well, that's a pretty good indicator. They're looking very closely when they're pulling up GIS data. My assumption
For a simple email from a planner, yes, that's
yeah. So it's they're going to look at whatever we submit. They're going to do a deep dive into it. So
Question on that.
yeah.
You said the.
Can you go into
ball
the
fields are
mic
excluded.
again, Rob? Sorry.
You said ball fields are excluded?
Yeah, he said that the parcel to the north of the main campus, which included the ball field.
But ball fields.
No, I'm sorry. He meant
Our ball fields or all ball fields?
The Wheaton ball field.
The Wheaton.
I stated it incorrectly. It was the ball field area of Wheaton
Oh, so they made a special. Okay.
for Wheaton because it was Wheaton, not ball fields. Ball fields
Okay.
are not. So sorry about that. Thank you for clarifying that. So time frame, the articles are due tomorrow, but we've already met that. I'll know sometime this week what the final dates are for us. We have our meeting scheduled for March and April. So that'll tell us. So from here tonight, you'll be selecting the parcel strictly for noticing, and then February, March, in that ballpark, you'll be refining the parcels, and then we'll be also focusing on the text recommendations. And spoiler alert, Steve has some comments on the use table there too. And then in March and April, the planning board will be making your recommendation, and we'll have to find out when we'll be having to present to Finance Committee and Select Board. So going back over this again, Norton Glen is one of the properties that we're looking at. I made a mistake on the last presentation. I excluded accidentally one piece of land, which was about an acre. So it's a total of 28 acres. Again, that gives you a little more buffer here too. So if we want to start, snipping things out of there, those could be some of the areas. So Mansfield Avenue, again, that's about 32 acres. Again, you might have some room to take something out there too if you want to try to get this closer to the 50 acre. But the two areas combined get you at about 60 acres. Again, that's not having run the compliance model, which after tonight, once you give me the direction, I'll give Serpid the go ahead. Serpent's our regional planning agency. They'll run the compliance model. They'll take things out like wetlands and so forth. But we're getting close. We're hovering around that number we want to get to, and you'll have opportunities to further reduce it. We also have 138 Barrows that you've talked about, the former Tweeve Mill, which is about 24 acres. This would be, I just listed as option B or plan B if you wanted to go a different route, but you talked about that. Next steps, again, you're going to be selecting parcels, and then we'll start to refine language and look at things like density bonuses and lot sizes and so forth. Real quick, I've wanted to make sure I was much more accountable on community outreach than the first go around we had with this. So I've been busy working on a lot of outreach events. We've had a couple. In fact, I don't want to go through this too much, but recently I had the first of what I call the road show. It was a small scale thing, but I want to do these once or twice a month. We had an event at Honeydew. I want to do one in about a week at Alberto's. It's just where the public can come in and we have a good conversation. In fact, Steve was there with me when the one last week. But I've also reached out to a lot of town boards and community groups. And I have right now 5 groups lined up, scheduled already. In fact, tomorrow night, the Library Board of Trustees. And then you can see later on groups like the Chamber of Commerce. The school board is in a couple of weeks. And Housing Authority and Water and Sewer Commission are already set up. But others that I'm working on, just getting dates finalized, is Council on Aging, Conservation, a few others, including the Land Preservation Society and the Veterans Council. And I saw Roger back there, and I know he's trying to help set up with the Veterans Council, so thank you, Roger. We're also doing a bit more socializing. In fact, the treasurer did me a big favor that we're able to put about a little 2-inch blurb in your motor vehicle excise tax bill. It'll be right at the top. It'll use a QR code, but a little write-up about it. So that way, people know about this initiative. We're also in the process of handing out a 1-pager to businesses and community organizations. We're using emails, social media. In fact, I just started with Nextdoor, and we're starting to get some communication going there. Facebook's been big. I also did a survey, and just real quick on that survey, it's only got 12 responses at this point, but it was trying to assess, where people are feeling about things, but also for me to find out if they want to learn more, if they want to meet. And I've got a handful of people I'll be reaching out to. So little victories there. The more we can reach out and answer questions, that's a success. Because at the end of the day, these other groups, I should point out with the other boards, town boards, they don't have an official vote on it. My main thing is they're town meeting voters, and I want to get out to any town meeting voter that we can. If a board wants to make a recommendation, they're welcome to do so, but I'm not asking for it. But I just want to make sure when people go to town meeting, they know what they're voting on and had the chance to have their questions answered. With the survey, again, this is such a small sample, but looking at what the benefits are, some people talked about the benefits would be more reasonably priced housing, supporting their businesses. But there were some who just said none of the above. There wouldn't be benefits. Conversely, asked about what concerns they have with implementing the law, traffic, schools, environmental, and so forth. And they also asked people, what type of housing would they like to see? Mostly small scale types of housing is what people said. And that's my spiel.
Okay. So I think I see your hand up, Rob. So just for the board this evening, we want to vote for parcels to be noticed. And my recommendation, and if people feel differently, would be to vote individually as sections. So when we get to that point, we'd say, I'd like to motion that we notice for the parcels in the Norton Glen, and then we do up or down to whatever we want to have. And we can have 2, we can have 3, we can have, if the board chooses to notice more, that doesn't stop us from whittling it down later. But that's how I think it makes sense to go about it.
My only fear with that is the more
And Mike?
my fear with that is the more we notice, the more the people are going to be confused and we're cloudy in the picture. Whereas if we're more concise, people are going to have a better idea of where exactly we're talking about. That's my only.
Yes. And I think the only reason where I would personally, I think, vote for additional sections would be to protect against a scenario where we pick 2 and we go to a public hearing and the owner of the Norton Glen says, "This is great. I've been looking to redevelop these for years. This gives me the mechanism to do so. Thank you very much." And we go, "Oh, we did this because we thought it wouldn't happen." And then we're stuck. So that's, I think, the only reason I think I would, in theory, vote for additional sections.
I think we might want to add some additional ones as well, just in case it doesn't meet the compliance model. So we have some.
I think we have the buffer now with those 2. If those are the 2 we land on.
Yeah.
The question is, because we have 10 acres of buffer right now, and we would whittle that down by parcel, basically.
Okay.
So I'm less worried about the compliance model buffer than a big buffer.
So
at
in the
this
case
point.
of the Glen, are we going to go literally parcel? Because in the case of the Glen,
I would take them as a group,
Okay.
and we would whittle it down at a future session to say, we've noticed all of these parcels. Our final selection is going to take out parcels 3, 4, and 5, or something like that.
Okay. There are some undeveloped parcels within the Glen
Which would potentially
that we may
be
want to.
built.
Yeah, we
if
may
we
want
wanted to avoid that, then
pull them out now. Yeah.
Yeah, the little section on the side called Libman Drive that's not developed.
Yeah.
That's
There
if
is-
you excluded that, you'd still have 25 acres.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
It's 23 and a half. Yeah. It's
Maybe
close.
there's a wetland that's just there, so yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's one rogue building that looks like it's split between the 2 of them, but other than that, there's not much down there.
okay. So Rob, sorry, you had a couple of questions or comments.
Well, I wanted to ask, because as you went through it, because I had also asked if we would consider East Main Apartments and Red Mill Village, both these areas too. And so, did they fall out or?
That's up to you all. I
well, they
have
weren't in the
I have data on the
presentation,
East
yeah.
Main.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we can take that up as
Okay.
a discussion point if we want to look at East Main as one of the things that we do or do not choose to notice.
But I want to have a very clear answer on this. Like, is Red Mill Village eligible
Yes.
under state law? Like, I know that the village, the district itself cannot mandate that it's a senior village. It can't have an age restriction. Are age restricted developments forbidden from being the district where we zone it?
I don't believe so. An excluded
See,
property.
it would be getting torn down and you build a new facility.
Then it can't be restricted
Well, no,
at
let
that
me finish.
point.
The restriction is on the facility.
No,
not
we
the
guys,
land.
we got to use the mics just to.
The restriction is on the facility, not the land. I did look into this. And so if you replace that, you put in this new development, if you bought that and tore it down, put in your new development, you're doing a new facility, you can designate it how you want. In this case, you're going to have to designate it according to the MBTA overlay rules.
It's an overlay, so you could do it either way. You could do the base zoning or the overlay. But if in theory, yes, that is not an area that we have had on our list to evaluate.
But we should
But yes,
look at
in
it.
theory, we can vote on whatever we would like during this session. So,
And then I'd like to just remind, East Main Apartments is a separate
yes,
thing from it, even though they're adjacent.
I think,
yes.
Chair, I think
Paul.
the only thing that I see on the list that would be excluded in this area would be wetlands and water bodies. But the uses themselves would not be
Yeah. If it was a deed restriction to the land or something like that, which would have made it prohibited by the something in there. That's I think what Steve was getting at. So I think we've had. Is there anything anybody wanted to put forward and discuss? I think we've had a lot of public comment on this. If there's people who would like to speak, I think I'd like to give them that opportunity before we vote on anything. Is anybody? Do we want to need additional comments or questions from procedurally before we have people come up? Okay, Ms. Winston, did I see your hand? If you, yeah. Sure. No rush. I'm glad you're moving better than you were last meeting. That was painful.
My concern is, as was yours, about the grant money. So it behooves us to put at least 1 or 2 parcels on that are unlikely to be built. That's my strong.
And 0 on, you mean 0 on places likely at the same time, right? Yeah. That's what you're saying.
Understood. Thank you. I see, yeah.
Bridget Carr, Oak Street. Could I just ask the board to please speak into the microphone when speaking? Because it's
Trying to.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know it's hard, but it is hard to hear.
Thank you.
Roger Marsan, 62 Power Street. First, I'm sure this is just beating a dead horse, but it seems like we have found ourselves again in a position where we're trying to find a way to get around what the state wants us to do. The state wants us to have more housing, and we're trying to say, where can we put this where nobody's ever going to build it? And I think the fight should be more with the state than amongst ourselves about where we want to put this. The state, again, is heavy-handed and coming down on us for no good reason except for their own political reasons. So let me just say that to begin with. Looking at the property on Mansfield Ave that you were looking at, I believe one of those parcels is owned by the town. I'm not sure if that was marked on that map that we had up. Just so make sure that we don't count that in as one of the parcels so when we're looking at acreage. Can anybody, do you know, Paul, what is the cost of noticing properties?
Each individual letter going out currently is 69 cents.
So
Plus,
we're not
time,
looking
plus
at,
the time town staff has to do to put it together and do it all, which is not nothing.
right. So that's the map I was looking at, and one of those parcels up near the top is owned by the town, I believe.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's where the kayak center
Right.
was.
And I didn't see on any of your maps the East Main and Red Mill Village as a single parcel that I think has the 50-acre that we need. But I'm not sure if that's just another parcel that we could notice and maybe reduce it from there. If the board decides that you don't want to do that, that's fine.
East Main was discussed as a potential Plan B, Plan C at our last session.
Okay. But I would just suggest that in regards to what Mr. Art said, I think that the more parcels that we have noticed, then we can narrow down where we want to go before we go to town meeting, as opposed to narrowing it down too early and then finding problems before we get there.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball, please.
Thank you. Bob Kimball, 51 Pine Street. We're between a rock and a hot spot, huh? Basically, what you have here is another unfunded mandate by the state to force us to do something we don't want to do. And unfortunately for everyone in this room, it will have an impact on our services. Mansfield Ave has been a sore spot with mine since we started this because of the obvious possibility that it could be used for commercial industrial development in the future. which we don't have a lot of that left in Norton. This is probably one of the prime areas that we could do something like that, including the golf course, which could be a possibility. Taking away this one parcel, one section of potential commercial industrial base is something that I would encourage you not to do. My reasoning for that is if you have sewerage, it's already there, they will come. They're going to come. If you put it in an area, I mean, we're talking about Red Mill Village, that has sewerage, town sewerage also, as does the Glen. The Glen, however, is I believe it's a forced sewer line, so it's not like anyone else can connect to it, but it's still in there. If you put it on a piece of land that's going to be already have town water and sewerage, it's going to encourage development. If you put it on Barrow Street, which has antiquated services, the pipes are very old, the water pipes, and I think it's an ideal situation. If you can take something that's already a problem, as we all know, the old property is a problem, and turn it into something positive, that's something that maybe could be considered. I just encourage you to take a look at this. I mean, an obvious example now is the new apartments right behind McDonald's. I mean, that's what you're looking at on Mansfield Ave in the future. And hopefully the industry on the other side will continue to grow, but as we know, as that happens and as people see new industry going in across the street, everybody gets in an uproar and says, I don't want that in my neighborhood. So it's just another example why we shouldn't use Mansfield Avenue. That green area behind is owned by the town. It's got a conservation restriction on it. Can't be used for anything else. We tried to use that as a dredging area years ago to clean the reservoir, and even that was a problem. So it becomes a big problem. On the density issues, obviously we don't want to give them any more than we have to. It's 50 acres, let's give them 50 acres, wherever it might be. Something that's going to come up in the village core pretty soon is people ask about the old Mansfield Bank. What's going on there? I've seen the plan. I don't believe you have, but I have seen the plan. It's a 23,000 square foot parcel. It's going to have 18 condos and 2 storefronts on it. That's what's being proposed. So if you can visualize what a half acre is going to look like in the center of our town, possible development in the center of town, imagine what's going to look like wherever we go. 750 new units of housing could be a real serious problem. Yes.
So let's let him.
But yeah, I'm almost done. I'm done. But I'm just bringing it up as an example. But I would encourage you to try to stay away from Mansfield Ave if you can. Again, we're between a rock and a hard spot. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and you've put a lot of effort into it. I know you have. It's just a question of where it needs to go. And in a town that doesn't have a train station, you go to Mansfield, you go to Attleboro, they've done a very nice job of developing those areas. I mean, that to me is what it should be about. That's where it should be. To bring it into Norton, where you barely have a bus going through the town, center of town at times, and expect people to get in their car, drive to a parking lot somewhere, get into a bus, get down to a train station, and then go into Boston and go wherever the hell you're going to go. I mean, it's just so many steps, and it's ridiculous that the state is even talking about any town that abuts an MBTA station should be involved in this. The right way to have done it would have been go for the areas that already have the train, deal with that, and if that doesn't work, then branch out. This is nothing more than an extension of the 40B process, the old comprehensive process. We're at 10% now. We finally made it there, and now they're going to throw this monkey wrench into the mix. So it just makes it a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But
And I think to your comment about Mansfield Ave, I think this is one of the areas that we got a lot of feedback on because it has existing multifamily already. So even if something went into one of those properties, it's not a net new everything on services in terms of units. And because they're all under split ownership, it's not ripe for any kind of massive redevelopment unless somebody bought people out one by one by one by one by one. I think one of the challenges that we see with some of the Tweed that we heard was there's nothing there now, so anything you put there is going to be net new, even if the current building is old, falling down in a fire hazard, as we saw a couple of years ago.
Right.
So
Well, I
that's
appreciate what you're trying to do. I really do, and I think you're on the right track. It's just a question of how to make it work in a way that we don't encourage the development. Hopefully not all at once, because that will have a major impact on us. I think we all know that we get about $5,500 for schools from the state every year. They give us an unfunded mandate they come along with and say, put up all this housing, and it costs us about $12,000, $13,000 for every student we put in the system. So it just has an impact on everybody. But appreciate what you're trying to do. If you can stir from Mansfield, I appreciate it. If not, if it's what it is, it is. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Could I make one comment? Just where Red Mill Village exists right now is zoned commercial. There is no guarantee by not including housing in a commercial zone that the housing won't go there. The 40Bs get permitted not by the planning board, and we can't prevent it regardless of our zoning. So just wanted to reflect on the viability of commercial. As much as we want to protect it, sometimes it's not protectable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let him go.
I think I read they have adopted, our action plan has been approved. Congratulations, that's good. With regard to getting your message out, if you have any taped programs, if you've taped any of the interviews you had or the sessions, if you could provide those to me.
Sure.
Red Mill Village, we weren't going to be able to have a meeting. There wouldn't be enough. There wasn't going to be enough interest to have a meeting. But if you give me a tape, I can put it on our website. In answer to your question, Red Mill Village was created by a condominium under 183A. That goes with the title to the property. So I would suggest that even though it's not zoned that way, it has the coverage. The ownership of that property is subject to the condominium law, which our master deed requires 55 and over. So I would suggest, may sound nice, but I think you're going to run into a problem, A, logistically, and B, if I had to try to explain what was happening to my community, you'd have a lot more people out at that town meeting than you've ever seen before. Question I had, I kept on reading this, and the one requirement it asks for is to be located not more than 0.5 miles from a commuter rail station, ferry station, or bus station. Does that not apply?
It's not for an adjacent community. No.
It's not for
It's a bus, but Oren was, because I know you would email, we don't have a bus station in Norton, so the rule gave us flexibility to place it in a reasonable area. A bus stop's not a station.
I understand. Well,
okay.
It gives you permission to request one if you needed one. So there's no MPA connection, but we're still required to comply. Forgive me, I haven't read the regulations. So there's no even though this is tied to mass transit, we have no mass transit connections in the state.
This was a big flaw.
Welcome to the last year of our lives.
This was a big flaw in the whole process. I mean, we're stuck with it, but because we're an adjacent community, we're not tied to, we're not limited as to where it can go. If you're Mansfield, you had to do it around your T-stop, or Attleboro did, and they were doing it already. But for us, we were given flexibility because we don't have any of those transit hubs that the law calls for.
Yeah.
So they did say you had,
and
use your best judgment with it, but we didn't have to place it within, half a mile of a T-stop.
What was the bus station or the bus stop that Leonard Street was supposed to be putting in? What bus was that transit for? There was a bus stop proposed in Leonard Street.
There is.
It was designed for potential GATRA.
Right.
Or what bus line was that, and what's it connected to?
The line I couldn't speak to. It was designed to potentially allow for it. There wasn't a mandate for it to be there.
Is that something the town would want?
It was a future route. That's what it was.
No, it wasn't. Not at the time. It came up. They were going to have negotiations to have it there.
Yeah.
Because the MEPA process was looking for it.
Right. I thought, that's a few years. You were on the board. I thought there was a discussion with GATRA for,
It was laid out in
but
their plans.
that was before COVID, and of course
It
they
it was
reduced
laid, it
service
was
in
laid out
town.
in their plans in response to the MIPA process.
But that's just a stop, so a stop doesn't fall under the requirements for locational requirements.
No, I'm just curious whether the town has any interest in promoting that, and given they're forced to do a lot of other things, whether that's something we would want them to do. I don't know that they wouldn't. Thank you.
Yes. And Oren, speaking to your incredulity about the regulations, the worst part is I'll say, I won't say the worst. That's maybe a poor qualifier, but the least fun part is that the Milton case that Paul mentioned, the state judicial court found that the state didn't go through the process of making the regulations correctly, so that it wasn't enforceable. So the state went, okay, here are these regulations that we didn't get approval on. Look, I'm going to put them behind my back, and now they're emergency regulations, and they work just fine. So it's interesting.
How we were going to do 1,700. That's what blows my mind.
Okay.
That plan-
Rob, did you have a comment that you wanted to say? And I know. Yeah.
You were asking about the state, why they went for the adjacent.
Rob, can you go into the mic?
Why? Sorry, I keep forgetting. Why they went for the adjacent communities? The reason being is they're trying to get as many towns caught here. If you look how the MBTA goes out there, and it's like fingers. By saying adjacent towns, they're sort of covering all the area in between the fingers. And basically, they've had an huge influx of people to the state they're trying to find housing for. And so putting this on more towns creates more. But that is the reason why they went for adjacent communities too. It was just to expand their scope. Also, I just wanted to elaborate on the point earlier about some things like Red Mill, and this would apply to East Main Apartments. Let's also remember that is a completely separate, it's adjacent, but it is separate. It is land we can use. The thing with that place is you can put it there, and a person is free to build there. But to do that, they've got to buy a whole bunch of already still relatively recent development that has been filled, and the value of that asset, they would have to buy that, take it, and then build their housing. And that isn't going to happen in any profitable sense. So by putting it in places like that, it's like Foxborough putting on top of the stadium. You're welcome to do it. All you got to do is buy the stadium from Kraft, tear it down, and build your housing. You know, that's the numbers aren't going to work, and that is how we can head this off, is putting it in places where it's like that. And if they decided to do it anyways, what the heck? It's already dense population. It's not really a net change for us. So that's the reasoning there, and that's also the reasoning we should apply to our choices, is places where they just, you know, people aren't going to do it.
So let's, Mr. Sweeney, if you want to just state your name and address for the record, please.
Mark Sweeney, 14 Laurel Lane. Good.
Okay.
That's fine.
Oren Siegel, 28 Cutting Road. I think was pointed out before, the more you do that, especially in populated areas and populated, you're going to open up questions and have more people at that town meeting asking more questions.
And we don't have a problem with that, because that's better than trying to explain an empty, unbuilt place where people are going to be asking the obvious question. Well, that's all net new population density added to Norton. That's going to hit upon the very warning the Finance Committee gave us, that we will not, that will cost us more to have that there than we'll collect in taxes. So it strains our budgets. They made that quite clear when we spoke to them. What?
So we're not going to, no. Yeah.
No, but I'm just elaborating. Those were the reasonings why, and the reasoning behind that. So I think having to tell a bunch of people, this is how we keep this from landing on your neck, versus putting it over here. You're going to be in the town that's having those budget problems. This is going to be your problem if we put it here. I think you'd find we could answer those questions.
So,
go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, Mr. Sweeney. I didn't mean to make it come up and then
Again, Mark Sweeney, 14 Laurel Lane. Paul, do you have a list of the grants? These are state grants, right, that we're not going to get if we say no to this? Do you have a list of those?
Yeah.
Pull it up.
It's an ever expanding list. I think
They've
that we
increased
noticed in the
Yep, they've added fire safety stuff.
let you know
How
what
much
they're-
for the fire safety are we talking?
Well, it just tells you their priorities, doesn't
Okay,
it?
but
No,
a
that's-
dollar figure is, do we know what the dollar figure is? Because
I
I'm the
think
biggest guy in town on fire safety as far as Charlie goes.
I think the
I'm keeping
biggest
Charlie, but I'll give it up. I mean,
I think the
But-
biggest one was there was a sewer grant that this town had applied or gotten for that was a couple $1 million, Paul, and the other ones I think were more in the tens of thousands rather than the big numbers. But there was a that was something that
Was that Elm Street you're referring to?
I believe so. Yeah, that was something that Michael Toole asked at town meeting in the fall.
so is the board's word that, well, not word, but concurrence that the grants are of value, that if we say no to this and just say no, I'm going to get to that point why I want to say no. But if do the grants outweigh the problems?
I understand your thought process.
Yeah.
I think speaking for myself,
grants.
I think the state has determined previously that they were going to play hardball. And when the Milton case said this is constitutional and enforceable, they certainly aren't going to back down.
Yeah.
They're including it in boilerplate for fire safety grants, and I assume any kind of discretionary grant or fund that somebody is putting out from any state office, they have a mandate from the Attorney General put in this boilerplate before it goes out the door.
Okay.
So that's my personal
Okay.
feeling.
All right. Well,
And
so now
Paul,
you have,
did you have the list of grants?
Trying to find it.
So that's
well, the issue is obviously to repeat everybody with schools. It's just going to kill the schools. You're going to get 700. I mean, you're going to have to build a new school basically somewhere in there to keep up with the kids. Give me a number: 750 kids, one for each house, roughly. I don't know. You get 2 kids now. You're doing well over 1,000. We only have 2,000 kids in school. You're going to go up by 50%. That means you're going to have to build schools somewhere, somehow. And if you put it out on Barrows, now you've got, it's a pain in the ass to get there, fire and police to get to Barrows. I can see 140, that's easier. But now you're going to be, Barrows is tucked away. I'm just saying this board should basically say no. I think the town's going to basically tell you to go say no, because you've got tonight, you've got me saying it. All right. Down the road, you're gonna have to go in front of the finance commission, the select board. They're all gonna say no because you're gonna have a public comment there. You're gonna have people like me coming in and saying no. And then when you get to the town meeting, it's gonna be a big no. You might as well just kill this thing right now and see what happens. I know, and that's why I'm asking what grants are you gonna lose? But other than that,
we have them on the screen now.
Okay.
If you'd like to look, I think
probably
with the larger point
yeah,
of what you're
bigger,
getting
huh?
to is why I think the 2 areas that we flashed at the beginning are the ones that we've been looking at since the open house event that we did and all the public comments that we had, is there properties that have existing multifamily already. So anything that if you tore it down and built something new, you're not having net from zero new on top of it.
Okay, but
if something was
all right,
built.
that's if you build, you rip down a bunch of houses that have kids and then put in, but still, you're still going to have a boatload of new kids, an upper, not just a net zero. You're going to have an upper.
And that's also, and we have the numbers on that A, and that's also why the town planner also did an evaluation of each of those lots, the land value and the property value, to make sure that none of the simple example is there's no crappy fixer-upper on a nice lot where it makes sense to tear it down and build it new. In all of those lots, the building value is higher than the property value it sits on. So none of them are ripe for redevelopment from the money perspective either.
See, right now, as we speak, apartments are the hot item. Nobody up in the Boston, Providence area, nobody can, under a certain age, 40, 45, pick a number, they can't afford a $500,000, $607,000 house, which is not that big. These kids can't afford that. They're all living with mom and dad type of thing. So they're all going to go to apartments. So my thought is they're still going to tear it down and build something new. The apartments are going to come because if you give them an opportunity, they will build it.
So, and
Speak to what he's saying.
yeah, But yeah, we do have the list of grants up. Are there questions about that before we move on?
No,
Or-
I'll let somebody else speak. Thank you. You,
Okay.
well, you just see what happens. Say no. What's going to happen?
Okay, I have
You know what I mean?
points.
The
Yep. The town hall will, I mean, the town meeting will say it for you, but I guess
I'd
your
like-
job is to present something.
Like to head that off. And that's what I want to speak to. If we are building these grants, yeah, we can lose them. Yeah, we can go to the mat fighting the state. That will cost us more money. Our best bet in Norton's best interest right here is to not have this be our fight. Let the other towns go to war on this. And this is why we're trying to promote the idea of building it on places where it either ain't going to happen, or if they do, we really don't care. It's not really a net change. And that's, to be honest, the parcels I'm pushing, that is exactly what I'm trying for. So in the end, this does not cost Norton anything, but we have complied, excuse me, I said that wrong. Okay, so this isn't our fight. The other towns, we can be reading it about it in the papers and not care. That's where I'd like to get us.
So
Can I just?
I think I was gonna.
I'm sorry. No, we want to hear from you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Bridget Carr, Oak Street. I agree with what a lot of Rob just said, but also this has been going on since 2021 when this was signed into law. So I feel like a lot of people don't know this is now year 4. We just passed the 4-year anniversary, actually, of it being signed into law. So we all know it sucks. It's a kind of a crappy law to begin with. The design for it is great. I think the concept is an okay concept of creating more housing in communities that have higher density and are more accessible to Boston, Providence, etc. But the way it was gone about, I feel like we all know the song and dance. It wasn't great. However, I do just think complying in the easiest way that puts the least amount of strain on our town. We don't have money. We're all pretty much aware of that. We don't have resources. We don't have much to lose. I would like to try and maybe not lose what we have left, potentially. Obviously, schools are a very big concern, and I do think that. But really going to these meetings and having attended other towns' MBTA forums in the fall, it's not probably not going to get built. That's what I know. We can't play by that. I know it sucks to say, and I get it, but that's kind of how most people that I see and interpret have been looking at it. Is like, yes, we'll comply, but what are the odds it's getting built? I don't know if that makes sense.
I support that. And the reason I'm recommending it is because if we do go in this fight, it costs us money. This is the bottom line. And she was just saying, we really don't have budget left. We just had a big fight about that last year. I'm certainly not looking to take on more strain on that. So it is an important thing to Norton. And we really do want to put our efforts into how to comply, because we don't want the fight, how to comply with this way. This is why I want to put the East Main and the Red Mill back in.
Yeah.
But
Paul, I think you were going to say something just to...
On the point about schools, and I'm glad Mark brought it up, and it's been brought up in that survey. Typically, multifamily actually has less impact on schools per unit than single family. Not always. Depends on the number of bedrooms, but there are studies out there. In fact, I've posted them. I posted one up on our MBTA project page that showed the impacts of multifamily on school districts, and it's not that significant. No. And I know people have a concern. They hear number of units, but not all units are the same. And multifamily typically is a lower generator of students.
But
so
we are adding. In theory, there could be more of them. So it's an argument, but I think it's a challenging argument to make at scale.
If we had overcrowded schools, that would be much more of an issue. And we have a great school district, and I don't have kids, but I would think people want to locate their kids in schools where they have great, locate their children so they can go to great schools, which Norton's fortunate to have.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I think, I think,
I'd like to come back and
finish and then I'm going to comment.
Yeah.
What you're saying on the schools, I know we don't have overcrowded schools.
Rob, can you make sure you're in the
We don't
mic,
have
sir?
overcrowded schools, but we do have underfunded schools. So the money thing does matter. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree with the downplaying you did because I've seen other figures. So I would review that thought. Now, what I was saying about why we need to comply and why we need to come up with something we can show people we are complying and tell the town, and this is why it's not going to get built, is because of what Mark Sweeney was up here saying is basically the people in the town, if we come up with something else, like some clever town, we'll give them a little and all that, they're just going to say no. And then we're not in compliance. If they put us down at this town meeting, we're busted. So I think we need to put our best foot forward, come through with something where people genuinely believe this is not going to happen to us and the state isn't going to fall on us. That's what you can get a yes vote from the town meeting.
Yeah. So
Well, just
let's.
yeah.
So, Mr. Kimball, did you want to make an?
Just fast. An example. I think Paul, I think you're trying your best to do it, but you have 15 units of housing on 1 acre parcel of land. Come on. It's more than one kid. And this whole discussion is going to be not about so much the impact of the development on the community. It's going to be about what's it going to cost us. On my street, Pine Street, when I built there, I could walk across the street, no problem. Today I'll get hit 15 times before I get across. Further down the street, they're building homes, $1.1 million. You know how much that's going to generate in taxes?
Not much.
About $14,000. We pay $17,500 to educate one kid in this town. So that is going to be if you're going to try to make an example of the impact on the services, that's the one you got to work on. Because to me, 15 units, 1 bedroom, okay, 2 bedroom, now you got a problem. And the gentleman I spoke to about the Noble Bank property next door to the Historical Society on West Main, his combination is 1 and 2 bedroom condos, 18 of them, 23,000 square feet. How many kids are going to be generated from that? How much are we going to generate in tax income? Not as much to
Lose
take
money
care
on
of.
that.
So I wouldn't use that as an example. When you start talking about school population, that's not a good example.
I also want to add the law or the guidelines in there. They do say these units should be family suitable. And so if you're trying to make them family suitable, that does imply kids.
Yeah. And I think, Ms. Winston, you were asking a question about density bonuses that ties into the language that would go into this bylaw separate from the map. That was something that was in the previous version of the bylaw and something that probably will not survive into the next version. Happy to have that discussion and when we get to the language.
Yeah.
The idea was to encourage commercial development along with residential. If we want to go more in depth with that when we get into the language around the setbacks, height restrictions, all that stuff. Hopefully not next meeting, but what we want to do tonight is parcel selection. So,
if I could just
yes.
make a comment and just kind of level set here. It is being imposed on us. It is being imposed on 177 communities, many of which have MBTA facilities running through them, which in those cases they are required to produce significantly more housing, much more dense housing. The developers are going to go after the lowest hanging fruit. The lowest hanging fruit is where they can get the most bang for their buck, meaning the most density in a single place, and where the infrastructure already exists. I think my opinion is this board should be focusing on removing as much low-hanging fruit as possible to make it less enticing. We also have to balance that with, do we want to potentially give up good commercial space? We also have to weigh that with, in terms of, potentially losing commercial opportunities. And I had another thought and it's gone, so I will just leave it at that. There was a point too, but it's gone. It's late. So I just wanted to say,
No.
I think the likelihood of us getting any building out of this 3A program is probably low. It's not going to happen anytime soon. It may happen. We may get 1 or 2 apartment buildings. We're not going to get 750. We're not going to get them all at once, that's for sure. There are far more opportune spots in this state for developers to go after than Norton.
Yeah. And something that, I mentioned at town meeting, I mentioned a dozen times over the past year, this is an overlay district. So it doesn't change the base zoning. So if we put it on an area that is zoned commercial, you can still put commercial there if you want to. Nothing keeps you from doing that. So
I'd like to suggest, though, that we not try riding on any of those assurances and that we actually put it where it isn't going to happen.
yes, no, I think we're all
Okay.
moving in the same direction there. Yes. So is there, and I see a hand raised in the virtual meeting. If you wanted just to unmute and introduce yourself for the record, please.
I assume you're talking about me.
Yes,
my name
sorry,
is
Brandon.
Brandon Noble. That's all right. Brandon Noble, 1 Gaffney Farm Drive. I am part of FinCom. Excuse me. Just a couple of thoughts. Paul, I wouldn't bring up anything about schools or, how many families there are going to be, because even just 50 or 100 is going to put us in a very bad financial situation. And if that's mentioned at town meeting or anything, I think residents are going to vote it down. So I just, my opinion. Secondly, thank you to the board. Just my opinion from hearing all this, we're all saying the same thing. I know I can't make a motion, if you will, but I think everyone has spoken, and let's put it in the spot that they're not going to build. To echo a lot of residents' concerns and people reaching out to me, I think we're all on the same page. As Laura said, it's getting late. That would be my suggestion: is let's get it someplace where it's not going to be built. Because if it does, we're going to be in big trouble.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
So any open space, a builder will find a way to build.
Yeah. So
just clarify.
I think I'm not seeing anybody new rush to the podium here. So if anybody does want to speak, please, Mr. Siegel. And if you can just lift the microphone up so you can.
Oren Siegel, 28 County Road. I don't know. I've been listening to several of these meetings. This is the first time that I've heard Red Mill Village and the 40B project next to it being put on the table. It's never been presented. And also what's curious is those are the only 2 residential developments that I heard you propose, all of which are on this side of 495. Understand, 495 has had, this side of 495 has had a traffic issue. It started even before the Leonard Street proposal. The MIPA project identified Newland Street as being daytime and nighttime over loss of service of F. That was before the build and after the build. Since that time, Avalon Easton has been built, and in addition to which, the Leonard Street project, although less building, has probably more parking in addition to last mile traffic. Now, if you were going to look at putting anything that, granted it may not be built, but looking at 750 units in this particular part of town would be disastrous. Let me finish. But I have not heard any, I'm sure there's other similar projects on the other side of 495 that I haven't seen proposed. And I don't know why they've all of a sudden, I realize Norton Glen is probably a low-hanging fruit, and I understand its proposal. But now to start throwing out Red Mill Village and 40B as 2 other alternatives to satisfy this condition, I think would be outrageous. Thank you.
I will say, Mr. Siegel, we did speak about East Main at our last session, and we had that on our list for final discussion this week. Speaking about the I know you've spoken before about how that side of 495 of Norton has seen a lot of development recently, and I think you feel like you're taking kind of your unfair share of the burden of development in that area, and I understand that. I think the reason for the inclusion of the Glen and splitting it up, one of the feedbacks that we got from the school committee and the finance committee was to try to, because the bylaw doesn't require one district, it requires at least one section of 25 acres or more, and then the split was split it between LG and JCS was the request from those groups. So that's why there's some in one place and some in another. So that's why when Paul has his slides, that anything is located with what schools does it feed into. So.
Okay. And then I'd like to, I'm sorry you've never heard of those before. I've actually come to this meeting, done PowerPoint presentations on it more than once, but
no.
Yeah. But however, and I'm so sorry you didn't get to catch those. But when you're talking about traffic and things, when you're saying how many units this would add, if you put it on East Main Apartments, and let's say hypothetically someone's tore that down and then built units, that wouldn't hold the 750. That's only 10 square acres if we're talking just East Main. And you build that up. See, now how many units were there before? So we're not adding to your traffic if that happens.
No,
that's what I'm trying to say. And it's not likely someone is going to buy a bunch of more recently built housing units that are already filled. That's an expensive asset now because it's filled. It's worth that much more. Okay, it's very unlikely someone's going to buy that to tear it down and build more housing. That can't be done profitably. And when you've taken away that profit, that's our best protection, Warren. It really is.
Yeah. I think
we can't just put it on the res or something where it can't happen for that reason. We have to put it somewhere that someone is allowed to build.
Yeah, I think we've covered the point.
Well, it got questioned again, so
no.
Fair enough for me to respond.
I don't see any additional hands raised in the virtual meeting. I think we've covered the bylaw to the degree that I really don't want to cover it in many sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have anything else from the board they want to add as a comment? Or does anybody want to make a motion to move toward parcel selection this evening?
We move toward parcel selection. And Steve seconded.
No? I wasn't looking for a motion to close discussion. It was a motion to put forth a section of parcels here.
Yeah.
You want to mention a set of parcels?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
As I kind of said at the beginning, I think it makes sense. Let's vote as a board for a set of parcels. So we would say...
Well, I have two then, because I want to put them...
One at a time.
Forth separately then. I'd like to make a motion that we also include East Main Apartments as one of our considerations.
Okay. I think that... Okay. Do you want that to be the first one that we vote on, or do you just want that to be part of the process?
Part of the process. I'm not picky about when you vote.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion for East Main Apartments.
Seconded.
We have a second? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to include the East Main Apartments parcels in the parcel selection. Do we have additional discussion? Okay. I'll go through the roll here just to make sure that it goes nice and simple. Rob, I'll start with you.
Yay.
Steve?
No.
Okay. Laura?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So East Main Apartments is 5-1.
Okay. My second motion is to include Red Mill Village. That means looking at it. If we find it's not eligible for some reason, that would come out later. But is to keep it or include it in our considerations right now at this time.
Okay, we have a motion for Red Mill Village.
Seconded.
And we have a second from Steve. Any further discussion on Red Mill Village? Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Laura?
No.
Jim?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
I'll vote no. So Red Mill Village, I believe that's 4-2. Okay. Additional selections.
Motion to include 138 Barrows, the Tweeve property.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to include Tweeve.
My thinking there is it is relatively the same size as the Glen. While I appreciate that the Glen, it's more useful to us by being 25 separate parcels, so we can whittle it down so that we are getting as close to the minimum required with a bit of a buffer as possible. The problem I see with the Glen is the buildings are really old. They were built in 1972. They're 53 years old. They are all on sewer. I think it would be, I think we should probably include both of them, but I think the opportunity for development is higher on Glen than it is on the Barrows property.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Tweeve on Barrows. Additional discussion?
The fact that it's open space and would be completely a net add of population makes that a showstopper to me.
But there's no sewer.
I
And there-
don't see, like Elm Street, that's not really stopping anybody. Yeah, I think that's a red herring. I think the fact that it's net add is what counts here.
It's not even
no,
close
it's-
to sewer.
No,
All
I
the way
think we know that it's been vacant for 10 years and is a fire hazard, but it's also empty. So it has pluses and minuses. And 10 years might be under. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Rob?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Okay. Additional options for parcel selection.
A motion to include the Great Woods parcels.
Do
So
we have
that's-
to itemize them, or can we just say it that way?
And just to clarify, you're suggesting the Mansfield Ave parcels that Paul has shown?
The Mansfield Ave parcels from the Mansfield line down to the apartments next to Roach Brothers, not including the mobile home park.
And not including the TPC that we...
There's no TP. Yeah, that's.
Okay. Just clarifying and making sure that we're not including that.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the Mansfield Avenues properties as presented. Additional discussion. Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And I will vote yes.
A motion to include the Norton Glen parcels and including Libman Drive.
Okay, we have a motion for the Norton Glen, including, is it Libman? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Eric, was that you?
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion on inclusion of the Norton Glen?
I feel
May I
like
just, sorry.
Go ahead. You go first.
May I just ask why to include Libman Court? Those are undeveloped. I'd prefer to leave those out.
Because I figured that's what we're. Sorry. I figure that's the couple acres we're whittling down. I don't
Why
plan
not-
on keeping
Why not
it.
whittle it down now then?
Yeah, we can get rid of it now by not
Just
including it.
jettison it.
Knock it off right now.
Okay,
All right,
so we're amending the motion.
Amend the motion to exclude Libman Drive.
Okay. Eric, does your second still stand?
Yes.
Okay. Rob, did you have additional discussion on that? If you want to just turn the mic again.
Yeah, I just, I'll point out, they were commenting the age of the buildings and the thing is still, there is housing there. I realized this would be a little denser, so Norton would take a little bit extra out of this. But that is not a terrible deal for the town if somebody tore that down and put new stuff in there. And I gotta add that in my opinion, if we're having the first floor retail and all, a little bit of a village and some shops over there, they're kind of no man's land way out there. That wouldn't hurt the people around there. Just a thought.
But if our marching orders are to put it in a place where it won't be built, does that qualify then?
I'll clarify the marching orders. Put it in a place where it won't be built, or it really isn't going to be a significant net change for Norton if it did get built.
I think everybody has their own opinions on what we should be putting forward here. But
Fair enough. That's what I've been preaching, though.
yes. Okay. So we have a motion and a second for the Norton Glen, which excludes Lippman. Any further discussion? Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Laura? Jim?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Anything additional that anybody would like to proffer? Otherwise, I'd say we would look to close this discussion and move on and conclude our meeting.
Did you have something you wanted? I know you didn't like my suggestion. Did you want to give your points or anything?
I think
Okay,
we've,
fair enough.
we've submitted it.
I just want to let
It'll
him have
be
a chance.
part of the public hearing. So,
Just want to make sure he was allowed to share all his thoughts.
Yeah.
Even the ones that don't agree with me.
Oren will not be shy of sharing his thoughts. Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay. I'm not hearing any additional discussion. So I'll move on from this point in the agenda. Thank everybody for participating. And we will look forward to seeing you again in the future. So,
One quick question.
Minutes?
Did the final list end as East Main, Tweed, Red Mill, Mansfield Ave, and Norton Glen?
everything that was put forward was voted yes.
Yes, was that so that's an accurate list?
Yes, Rob.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, yes, please, if you could just come up to the microphone. Just
It's going to happen again in May. This is.
Is it possible to check with town council as to whether Red Mill Village would qualify? Given it's basically under a condominium restriction, which basically Master Deed senses it's age restricted.
if it is, I think if there is,
Let's do it.
Paul, from a timing perspective, I know we do need to work on getting signs and notices out. Do you feel there's time to do that research before that deadline?
Couldn't we get?
No, let's.
I can ask council.
Okay. Yeah. If there's and if there is a deed restriction which makes that area incompatible with the state guidelines, would the board like to? Is the board in agreement that we would not want to notice it?
Yes.
I'm in agreement with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Rob, does that answer your?
Yeah, I was going to ask if, I mean, so we go ahead and we proceed with it and we ask town council, because you're worried about timing. Town council came back and says, no, you can't include that. We just go, oh, okay, they're up. We don't care if we noticed them or not.
Well,
The
if we
reason-
notice them, they will get a letter saying, "Come to this public hearing. Your property has been noticed for this."
Yeah.
So
You-
we want to
you're-
have that determination, if possible, before a notice goes out and before the entire community shows up asking us why we
They're
noticed it.
talking about an aged community, that this, if notice is not necessary, shouldn't go out to them. They may end up getting notice because of 40B anyway, because we're within 300 feet. But getting them notice of their location, I'm going to welcome you to come visit, because I don't want to try and
I
explain to
understand that
everybody.
people won't like it. My research was on the law and how that worked.
Not like it, not
free
understand
to
it,
go and
not
research it,
understand
yeah.
it and not feel good about it.
Fair enough.
No. Okay.
I'm open to that being done, though. Go
Okay.
Ask the question.
Okay. So we'd started in the meeting, and I'd said we would put the minutes off until the end. So now we're at the end. So it's time to come back to the minutes here. After our last session, I had gone through the list of open minutes and made a spreadsheet like I said I would. And I highlighted
Love a
7
spreadsheet.
minutes for us to try to approve it this session. Does everybody feel like they adequately reviewed them in order to vote? Or do people feel like we did not? If we did,
I'm
then I will
prepared to
move
move forward.
forward and
I'm fine with moving.
okay. So we'll start with the minutes of, I'll just go from top to bottom in my sheet here. We're doing all the planning and zoning joint meetings, starting with February the 13th.
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor of approving the joint meeting minutes from February the 13th, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay. One abstention. Next, the joint session from March the 13th. I'll
So
motion
moved.
that we approve those minutes.
So moved.
Seconded.
I think I actually motioned Laura,
Oh.
so
She ate. Yeah.
double motion, but I think it counts the same way. Any additional discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. Next is the joint session from April the 25th.
Sorry. Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstaining.
Okay.
It's getting late.
Next is the June 4th joint meeting. I'll motion that we approve those minutes.
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Next, July the 9th. I'll move that we approve those minutes.
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Two more. Next, I'll move that we vote to approve the joint session meetings of August the 1st.
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And last one. From the October the 24th joint meeting, I'll motion that we approve those minutes.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. That concludes that. Anything else anybody would like to say in this open session before we adjourn?
I'll make a motion. We adjourn.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.